Here we are on the Valley Floor Tour.
As you pull out here, you are on an open-air tram with no seatbelts. This is a traditional vehicle. They do not make them anymore. So to help us keep them on the roads, please, if you have littles, let's put the littles in the middle and keep all hands, feet, and personal items over the floor of the vehicle. Please do not be like the fine gentleman last summer who was taking photos on his brand new iPhone, leaning out over the side of the tram, dropped it into the center of the road on a one-way stretch of road with no pullouts. We are not able to stop. I'm sorry, right? We could not go back with the stop sign, so video cameras, cell phones, little children's hats, buckle them down, especially as we're going up and down the hill if we make it up to Tunnel View.
I think it has
tour. I said 2 hours, we're going to shoot for 2 hours. Traffic on an afternoon in Yosemite Valley.
You were screaming like it hurt.
Well, I wanted to stop. So we're going to shoot for 2. We're going to adjust our stops based on that.
Looks like there used to be a waterfall.
The Valley View. That will be your one and only restroom opportunity. And by restroom, I say that means lodge. That at Valley View, possibly a stop at Tunnel View, and a roll by on El Cap. Maybe a little bit of stop to see some climbers. Is what we're trying to get going today. It's going to be hot, so make sure to wear your hats, wear your sunscreen, drink some water. If you did not bring a personal water bottle, we have a cooler up there for you at one of our couple of stops. Finally, other than water, please refrain from eating and drinking. Keep the sticky stuff to the stops when we're off the tram. For sure, make sure you get those calories, those electrolytes, the salts in between the stops, but let's keep the tram clean and easy to hear for everybody else. All right, wasting no time, pulling out onto the main road for our first site, a cultural attraction known as Campground 4. Now this is not just a plot of dirt, right, Ranger Val? Why are you pointing to a parking lot? And in fact, this is Campground number 4 on the National Register of Historic Places. It is the only site on the Register of Historic Places that is not a physical structure. It's a plot of a campground. Why is it so special? Because modern big wall climbing found its home here. Climbers up on these big walls, the rock walls that you see around us, we're developing gear, technology, safety information, routing ideas on how to ascend these walls from the bottom to the top. Big wall climbing often refers to anything that is more than 1 day at a time, so multi-day climbs started here. They come down from their climbs, share that information over the shared fire pits, shared picnic tables, and we still operate this campground as a sort of communal campground space in that honor. Now, FPS did not always acknowledge this campground for its cultural history in that way, because it came over it in the 90s, when the flood came through and wiped out the infrastructure, which makes for employee dorm-style housing. We're in need of some more employee housing in the area, but climbing community said, no, not here. This is a cultural icon. This is Camp 4. 600 of them came out to protest in the 90s, got it added to that National Register of Historic Places in 2003, so that people like me cannot take it for granted any longer. Next cultural site that we're going to get an eye on through the trees has been here a lot longer than Camp 4. Wahoga Village, you'll see the structure of a ceremonial roundhouse getting ready to go. This is being built and designed by an all-native construction and engineering firm, hand-hewn beams, with a roundhouse that will serve as an prayer and ceremony site for native elders to pass down tradition to their youth in the tribes, in the North tribes, and be an educational facility as well for the millions of annual visitors such as yourselves who visit Yosemite Valley for years. Now, why is it so important to continue to feature native architecture in its traditional style like this? That's because places like our left-hand side, Gliding Meadow, coming up, have featured some non-traditional portrayals of Native Americans over time. I'll tell you about that after we roll up and get a lovely view of Sentinel Rock,
Sentinel Falls,
and Sentinel Falls across the way.
Oh, you can really see it well here.
Very unusual for us to have a view of Sentinel Falls in nearly July, right? We're coming up on 4th of July holiday weekend. And this time last year, we would not have seen this waterfall. 300% annual snowpack is what's contributing to us seeing both Sentinel proper and the Sentinel overflow on that right-hand side.
Yeah.
So 1.5 waterfalls for the price of the When it's not underwater, Gliding Meadow has historically been used for, again, some non-traditional portrayals of the Native Americans in the area. The Awanichi, or people of Awani, means place of the gaping mouth. were the original inhabitants of this land. 8,000 years of archaeological history we have on record. About 4,000 years of those are settlement style, so Native Americans would have been more settled in different areas of the valley. Wahoga village area over there was the Miwok tribe, modern-day Miwok tribe, formerly known as the Awanishi. Today we have 7 associated tribes in the Yosemite Valley area, in and around the park. And they contribute to park management decisions, cultural restoration, and continue to live in the park. Many of them are. But in Lining Meadow, 1916 was the year that the National Park Service took over management of this area. 1917, PS introduced a tradition called the Field Days. Again, it's not underwater. That was home to a racetrack, horse racing, trick roping, costume contests. And PS would actually pay natives to dress up in stereotypical plain-style war-style head bonnets, to fit sort of the stereotypical American view of an Indian. Not super traditional to the style. What they wore here? Smaller deerskin loincloths. It got hot in the summer. They lived up here in the summer times, migrated out during the fall in the valley, out of the valley. And more simpler dresses. Beading was introduced in about the 1870s. They would have added some glass beading onto those deerskin dresses as well. What is traditional craft-wise or activity-wise? Traditionally were basket weaving and that beadworking post-1870. So basketry, as we start to look, as the meadow opens up here from this rock fall zone, the meadow opens up, you'll see some deer grass, some bear grass on the sides of the road. And those things, when picked and dried, can be woven into traditional baskets. Back in the day, they used to have more simple geometric shapes, simple patterns used for collecting acorns, gathering those types of things. And for cooking, they could be woven so tightly, without the use of resin, without the use of other additional waterproofing, that they would hold water, hold hot stones, put the water in there, put stones straight from the fire, boil it, and that's how they would cook their acorn mush. We've got a number of black oak trees, like this small one over here, smaller, darker in patina on the valley floor, and they produce acorns. Acorns are a very traditional food staple in the diet of modern-day Miwok people as well. Eaten like an acorn mush, modern-day oatmeal style, or even baked into acorn bread. That was about 70% of traditional diet back then. But basketry, that deer grass, that sort of things. If you'd like to see an example of those baskets, the Indian Cultural Program has a museum in Yosemite Village, open 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. daily. Master basket makers like Lucy Tellis and Julia Parker in the past have woven things larger than the size of my arm span. That was partially because of the advent of those Indian field days. Basketry contests were a part of those, and PS would offer prize money for the most intricate basket. So those baskets went from traditional functional uses to more artisanal grandeur and display. 3 to 4 years to make something with my own span. The cameras are coming out. I think there's a famous rock feature behind me. I'd love to tell you the native adaptation, the story of how that rock feature came to be. The story of modern adaptation shared with permission. The story of which takes place in this valley before the valley, when it was in fact a flat expanse. Mother bear and 2 cubs are wandering through the woods in search of some grubs and an afternoon snack. And Mama Bear drops her baby bear cubs off the banks of the Merced River to go swimming, take a little dip, and quench their thirst. She goes off to look for some grubs, look for some berries, maybe find an apple tree. Drops off the bears, they go swimming, they quench their thirst, and then they fall asleep on top of a boulder that starts to rise into the sky. While Mama Bear is gone, this boulder brings the bear cubs so high up in the sky and out of sight that when Mama Bear returns, she does not have eyes on her kiddos and is worried. So she enlists the help of her friend, the red-shouldered hawk. Red Hawk flies up, lays eyes on the baby bear cub, but can't land because the rock has grown too tall in the sky. It is too windy to allow for a landing platform. So, Red Hawk flies back down and gives Mama Bear the bad news. Mama Bear enlists the help of her friend, the cougar, the mountain lion, who makes it a little bit further than Mama Bear can herself, trying to scratch and claw at the rocks. We can still see these striations, these claw marks on the rocks today. Neither were able to make it to the top of the rock. It had grown too tall too quickly until measuring word, young Chutaka tries his chance. Climbs ever so slowly but surely up the valley walls. makes her way to the bear cubs, grows with confidence, spanning the rocks of the valley that have themselves started to grow up out of the valley floor, delivers the bear cubs almost as if on a slide back down to
pretty
Mama
dry
Bear. Mama Bear and their
You
family
can see where it flowed.
in honor of Tutaka, or measuring worm. The animals named this rock Tutakanula, or El Capitan, behind me, as you may know it's called. Now, if you were not a measuring worm, or an inchworm, you were not an inchworm, and you wanted to climb some of these great rocks, some of these big walls in Yosemite Valley, how are you going to go about doing that? There are three main styles of climbing practiced in Yosemite big wall climbing these days, the most popular of which is called trad climbing, traditional climbing, also known as aid climbing. We're coming up on a view here of Slaughterhouse Meadow. We've got Wasky Pond with the Middle Cathedral, the big wider rock across the way, and the cathedral spires, the cathedral rocks over there. Harder to see in this lighting, but two really skinny, exposed rock facets up there. If you wanted to climb Cathedral Spires, that's a popular climbing spot, that would take you about a day. That's about a full day climb for an average, air quotes, climber, because nobody climbing here in Yosemite Valley is a beginner. Everybody here is pseudo-professional, if not professional, making a career out of climbing. These walls are nobody's first climb, like the big walls. But one day over there for the Cathedral Spires, if you wanted to climb El Cap, traditional style, that's about 3 to 5 days. Again, multi-day climbing, pioneered out of that Camp 4 campground. Multi-day climbing, and when you're going on a backpacking trip, much less a vertical wilderness trip up the big walls, you gotta take all your gear with you, both on the wall and off the wall. That means you're taking a couple 100 pounds of climbing gear itself, camming devices and wedges to slide into the cracks on the wall to prevent yourself from falling, ropes at hundreds of meters apiece, shoes, helmet, a portable ledges, you've got to have somewhere to sleep, right? There are some natural rock ledges that some climbers can sleep on, but there's not infinite lodging space up there on the vertical walls, so many will invest in a portable ledge and pack that up with them. On top of that, you're taking the things you need for your own personal basis, right? A gallon of water per climber per day. If you're going out for 5 days and it seems 2, that weight adds up. The food you need, often dehydrated. Those extra snacks, the sleeping bag, your cover for your portal ledge. This is hundreds of pounds of gear being pulled up after you on a pulley system up the wall. Trad climbing. My favorite trad climbing story is that of Mark Wellman, because Mark Wellman was a ranger like himself. Now, I don't much climb, but Mark Wellman was both an interpretive ranger who gives tours like this, as well as a climbing ranger. We do in fact have rangers who spend most of their work week up on El Cap, just hanging up on a portal ledge, checking permits, checking scientific monitoring equipment, and that is their work week up on the wall. So that's what Mark Wellman did for a living. In 1987, he also became the first paraplegic athlete to summit El Capitan. He was not only a Paralympian, but the first athlete to summit El Capitan using only the use of his arms. Ropes in trad climbing, devices to help you up the wall, rope ladders, athletes of all abilities and ages coming through Yosemite Valley to test their shots, to test their grip strength on their big walls. Another favorite is Pearl Johnson, a local who climbed with a climbing ranger friend and some family members, topped out of El Cap at age 9.
See if I can find some climbers.
8, 9, 10. Would you climb El Cap? No? Yeah, I probably wouldn't either. I appreciate the valley floor tour, keyword floor. Nice to hear on this transport, getting the nice views from below. So many a way that we can appreciate El Cap. Bill's going to try and help us find a spot to appreciate some climbers if there is any parking.
Oh, I think I see some.
My trick for looking at climbers is
I think I see some right here.
Wall as a snowplow. So the middle of the snowplow is the pointy part that sticks out. Same thing here with El Capitan.
Stupid Cheetos truck.
There are some climbers, at least that were this morning, wearing orange and green.
I saw the orange.
Right above a feature called the Crescent Moon. It might even be a little further to the right-hand side. So look out, just little ant-like features, right? This wall is 3,000 feet tall, double the height of the Empire State Building, and almost 3 Eiffel Towers. So if we're seeing a person, 5 to 6 foot tall person on this wall, there are approximately the size of an ant. We're going to look for those climbers.
I saw him. I was trying to get him with my camera. Yeah. There's two of them.
So not only is traditional
See the green and the orange dots.
what climbers
I think mine are wearing white.
I see one orange and one green. The sunlight is making it hard for me to pick them up on my camera, though. Okay, if we can stop, I can probably focus on them.
What's up on about the second bridge?
Yeah, right?
How lucky was that? Parking on that meadow on a weekday afternoon.
I got him.
You got it?
Yeah.
So from here, your best landmark when we get stopped is going to be the dead tree in the middle of our field of vision. There's a bush up here up front that might be blocking some of the low-down climbers for y'all for that.
There, I got
The
him.
tree in the center of our clearing.
I got him.
Oh, I see them.
Yeah.
I see them.
I just took a picture of them.
Blue, right?
Yeah, orange and green.
Never seen
Right
this.
above that dead tree.
That's why I have that.
Okay, I can't. Let me see if I can find them
Lots of
again.
green showing through.
Yeah, I see. It might be three. I can't tell if it's two or three.
Where are they?
Right over the dead part of the branch.
Yeah, the top of the dead tree. Okay, yeah.
While we're waiting and spotting some climbers, I'm going to pass back
Yeah, I
some
can see
climbing
them pretty
props.
clearly. I think there's just two.
With them on the wall.
Yeah.
We've got a camming device. You can squeeze
Or I
this
couldn't
one
be
climber,
sure.
stick it in the cracks on the wall.
Okay, I really need to save battery.
I hope
So
they
I'm
don't fall.
For a living. But I do know some climber folks, some dirtbags, as they affectionately call themselves.
I'm just.
To say that the value of the climbing equipment in their car is actually worth more than the vehicle itself. So, not the cheapest hobby you can throw your way in Yosemite, but it is a very cool one, right? We just looked at the nose route. The nose is popular for a number of reasons. One being a very famous ascent in 1983. It was long thought that that stretch of granite was slicker and steeper than many others on Capitan. It was never going to be able to be climbed any other way but traditional cave climbing. Again, use of devices like ascenders and rope ladders to get yourself up the wall. Free climbing does use fall protection, like the gear that I'm passing back, but does not use ascension aid. So those slick moments, you only have the strength of your grip to help you ascend up the wall. It was so slick. Lynn Hill, though, climber in the 90s, thought, hey, I think I can do it. And when she topped out rope path, became the first person, much less the first woman,
There's Ribbon
to
Creek.
ascend that route to the rope path. Changed
There's Ribbon Fall.
climbing, changed the style of climbing that is now one of the most popular ones.
Ribbon. Wind's pretty strong here.
A pair of German brothers climbing on the right-hand face of El Capitan in the 80s. We call it the North American face because if you squint ever so slightly,
Well, it's flowing
there's a
pretty good
splotch
right
of
now.
granite that sort of looks like the North American continent. Climbers have been known to
There's
use
Sahara.
radio down notifications saying, hey, I'm on the Baja Peninsula today. Or this morning I plan on climbing up to Newfoundland. So one way to orient yourself on El Capitan. So on the North American wall, Huber brothers are climbing. It's the middle of the 80s. They want to set a free climbing speed record of the North American wall, meaning yes, fall protection, no ascent aid. The crux of this route, the most difficult portion, is a pendulum swing, meaning that traditional climbers would bolt in with their rope, leap from one ledge to another across a very slick stretch of granite, and use their rope to swing to another platform for better vertical handling. Free climbing that's out of ethics. So what did the Huber brothers do? They formed a human pendulum. Brother number one used the strength of his grip to hold on to the ledge. Brother number two used the strength of his grip to hold on to the ankles of brother number one, and they human pendulum themselves over to that platform to get them in. Again, you won't find me forming any human pendulums on El Capitan. I'm a belly floor tour ranger during my work week, but still makes for a good story. Luckily, there are many hobbies to be had here in Yosemite, including photography. It's a great time to get your cameras back out for yourselves. Come have a great photograph opportunity and viewpoint of Bridal Veil Falls. Bridal Veil Falls.
Oh yeah.
It's about 600 feet, 611 feet tall. And if I had to speculate, might be one of our most photographed waterfalls in Yosemite National Park. Now, we have Yosemite Falls in this valley. That is the tallest waterfall in North America. We have the Mist Trail with Vernal and Nevada Falls, very popular hiking trail. Why this one? Well, this one doesn't close. This one is not ephemeral. It is year-round, thanks to that hanging valley swooping U-shaped feature up above us that traps some really waterlogged and moisture-loving soil up there, so that after the snow finishes melting for the season, after Yosemite Falls is gone, after our other ephemeral waterfalls like Sentinel Falls are gone, we still get a view of Bridal Veil, even into the dry months of August and September. Native name Pahono, which means puffing wind. There's a time of year where wind comes up the 140 Highway Canyon, sort of slams itself into this entrance of the valley. Bridal Veil Falls right here. And when the water is only coming from that spring, it's a little lighter in flow, and it blows around like a bridal veil.
That's an unnamed waterfall.
Hit the wall and blow up, and it will look like the waterfall is flowing upwards into the sky. Pretty cool effect late summer. Another water feature, though, that I shouldn't forget to point out, worth a mention, is that Merced River below us. Merced River flowing at almost double the rate this time in this month of the year as it was the same time last year.
Snow.
So as we come up,
there's some snow there.
Stop to deboard the tram, the valley viewpoint. Let's do so in a way that is safe and respectful of the power of this river. We won't be wading, we won't be swimming. Again, double the rate of normally of this time of year for the river. Drowning is unfortunately the #2 cause of fatality in Yosemite National Park annually. The #2 preventable cause, anyhow. #1 being automotive accidents. So traffic can be a little wild, especially on an upcoming holiday weekend. So if you're sticking around, just make sure you're driving safe, save your life, save wildlife. Things can pop out or child on the valley roads. Before we get to our stop, though, I want to tell you a quick, more lighthearted story about someone else who found this view hopefully as inspiring as you all will today. That was a young boy hailing from the San Francisco area about a century ago. The young boy's parents and teachers noticed over time as he was heading up through grade school, that he wasn't really taking to those 7 or 8 hour school days like everybody else. He had a lot of energy, he wanted to be outside, he wanted to learn from nature. Doctors today may have diagnosed this as something like ADHD, or dyslexia, but back then, all his parents knew is that he might thrive better in a homeschool environment. So his dad did something really unusual for the day, pulled him out of public school, and not only homeschooled, but nature schooled him. They lived right next to Golden Gate National Park. That's a nature's playground, a paradise there for a nature lover. Used that as a schooling opportunity. When the San Francisco World's Fair came to town when the young boy was 13, used that as a school opportunity. They bought season passes, and it was there that he saw photographs and art hailing from Yosemite Valley for the first time. He said, "I want to go there, Dad." The family took their first family vacation when the young boy was 14. It was on that trip that they first saw the valley viewpoint that we're rolling up on, the first view of Yosemite Valley, and his parents gifted him a camera, a Kodak Box Brownie model at the time. High technology, and you might say that it was love at first light because a young Ansel Adams fell in love with both Yosemite and photography on that trip to Yosemite. So you will have 10 minutes of your own, 10 to 15 minutes of your own to take some Ansel Adams quality worthy photos when we hop off here at Valley View. Make sure that the hydraulic steps is extended before you step off. We're going to wait for Bill to help us cross the street to get to the restrooms. And if you do need to use the restrooms, let's make sure and do that on the front end of the visit so we can get through a line if there is one. 10 minutes, we'll call you back. I'll take the climbing gear, however far back it made its way, and enjoy the valley view.
Bridal Veil Falls. Half Dome's kind of hiding.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Sorry.
Would be a good idea to pitch a tent underneath that.
No. Oh, that one? Not a good idea.
Hits the Sierra, drops down on top of high country, and normally falls as snow above 6,000 feet in the winter. Right? It's January 1st, it's not warm in the park. On this day though, with this atmospheric river, it mostly entirely fell as rain. So the Merced River here has a 200,000 acre drainage. When everything falls as rain, every single peak and valley in that watershed is funneling that rain from 200,000 acres into this area, this narrow area of Yosemite Valley. The river rose, it rose above this bridge here, still above our heads. And that little USGS monitoring station, river height gauge across the way with the solar panel, clocked our river today at 7.5 feet. 7.5 feet, still double what we normally see this time of year, on average. During the 97 floods, that gauge clocked it at 24 feet. So we're not even seeing a third of what that river was on the 97 floods. So, minor flooding that we may experience due to the upcoming temperature increases are not going to look anything like what we had in 97. That was a major undertaking. But the flooding creates some cool water features. Water features like the Merced, like many of our seasonal waterfalls, and others. Like
There's little tiny water.
Spring-fed, the smallest waterfall in the park.
For
Mere 18 inches. We shouldn't knock it for its size though, because our own Ansel Adams, photographer extraordinaire of Western landscape photography, has a photo of Burnt Spring. You can see it in the Ansel Adams gallery. Long exposure style. Dogwoods in the back, very nice. Also used in other artists in a variety of ways. Other artists of Ansel Adams' contemporaries. Shira Obata is one of my favorite artists to have taken up residency here in the park. Obata was a Japanese-American immigrant, came over from Japan in 1903. He was known for his watercolorings and his sumi ink paintings, and more specifically, the quality of material which he upheld when making those paintings. For his reds, he liked to grind down ruby gemstones into his pigments, and he'd use that. For his greens and blues, he would use a ground turquoise gemstone. We're talking hundreds of dollars for a little tiny bottle of pigment there. And for his water, to watercolor with, he would make a pilgrimage to Burnt Spring, pick up the water there, and use that to make his art. I think it's a super meta way to paint the park with water from the park. Very cool.
There's Ribbon Fall.
Speaking of waterfalls, we've got another waterfall behind me, and that's Ribbon Falls, the tallest waterfall in North America. Now, Ranger Val, you just told us that Yosemite Falls was the tallest waterfall in North America, and that is also correct. This is the tallest single-drop waterfall in North America. From the top to where it's hitting the bottom of the valley floor as mist, not even water by that point, is over 1,000 feet. Yosemite Falls has upper, middle cascade, and lower falls, so segments of that, and it's the tallest multi-pitch or multi-tier waterfall in North America. So we're just breaking all kinds of records here in Yosemite Valley, especially this season with these ephemeral waterfalls flowing at the rate that they still are. But Obata, he likes views he likes the views just like Ansel Adams and everybody else, but his style of art is my favorite that has come out of the park. Great nature style. Unlike, the valley view portraits or the tunnel view portraits where we're heading up to, Obata liked the unassuming view. So he would take a ponderosa pine bark relief and draw that with his watercoloring and his inks. He would take the moonrise over El Capitan and the shadows on the rocks. So more portrait style, a little closer up, more magnified. Beautiful paintings, magnificent way to portray the park, and different from any other artist I've seen come out of Yosemite. So he's one of my favorites. And of course, Ansel Adams and Obata are far from the only artists who have been inspired by Yosemite.
Thunderstorm is building up.
In late August of this year, we're back here in the park. Last weekend in August, the Obata Art Festival is going to celebrate Obata's legacy.
Cool.
Because after Obata emigrated in 1903, after he took his first pilgrimage up to high country, 1927, became inspired with those views of high country, he dedicated most of his lifetime body of work to portraying Yosemite through art. It's pretty unique for an artist to choose one location, fall in love with it so heavily, and portray that. Later on in his career, Obata and family fell victim to the xenophobia of the American government after World War II, throughout World War II, were interned in concentration camps in both California and Utah, and it was there that Obata asked to start an art class on site to continue to provide hope and activities for his neighbors. So in his legacy, the legacy that he's left on Yosemite, the legacy that Yosemite left on him, we have the Obata Art Festival at the end of the summer. Great thing to do if you want to go on a walk as an artist, take some art classes, and see Yosemite through a different set of eyes. But again, far from Ansel Adams and just Obata, not only has the park inspired artists over time, artists inspired the park, and not only Yosemite, but the tradition of public lands themselves. So in 1855, we had our first tourist party, our first Euro-American tourist party of outsiders come here to see Yosemite Valley. James Hutchinson was the leader. He was a hotelier, a tourism agent, and ran a California tourism magazine. He hired for his tourist party a sketch artist by the name of Thomas Ayers, who brought his pen and sketchbook with him to document Yosemite Falls and Tunnel View are among some of the sketches that he produced for publication in that tourism magazine. And this was the first time that the outside world had seen views of Yosemite, sketches though they were. We've had art in the parks for thousands of years, right? The Awanichi, basket making, beadworking. But this was the first time that art had left the park and found its ways into the eyes of the world. And when the world saw it, the world said, I want to go there. And that kick-started the history of tourism in Yosemite Valley. Who else came to tour but other artists like Carlton Watkins, a photographer in the mid-1860s. When I say a photographer, I do not mean that he whipped out his cell phone from his pocket and took a couple shots, put it away, and then went to download it to his computer. It only took Mr. Carlton Watkins 12 mules to pack his mammoth lithograph wet plate camera down into the valley in 1861. Because it was wet plate, he was setting up a dark room, a film processing room on site here in Yosemite. But these were images so crisp, so clear, so large. No one had ever seen anything like it. It's some of the first photography that the world saw from Yosemite, including the United States Congress. Senator John Conness from California took those photos, put them on the Congress floor, and said, hey, look at what's in my state. We should protect this. Congress agreed. They saw the photos. They signed the Yosemite Grant Act of 1864 and put that bill on Lincoln's desk in 1864. Now, if I was president in 1864 and I saw a bill on my desk protecting some pretty scenery, I'd probably be happy. I'd probably also have a lot more on my mind, right? It's the Civil War. Brothers are fighting brothers. This is the most mass casualty we've seen as a nation in a long time. And do I have time to consider a park bill? Yes, because reportedly, Carlton Watkins' photos also ended up on Lincoln's desk. And even though he had never been to California, even though he had never seen Yosemite with his own eyes, he understood the beauty and the inherent value in this landscape and signed that bill into law, creating the first piece of public land in the history of a federal government. Never before had a centralized governing body set aside a piece of land, a park like Yosemite, explicitly for the use, recreation, and enjoyment of its people. Both Yosemite Valley here and the Mariposa Grove with big trees about an hour up this road, the Highway 41, are portions of that original Yosemite grant. Now raise your hand if you've been to Yellowstone.
Oh, Yellowstone.
Yeah, if you've been to Yellowstone, I'm sure the rangers there are going to tell you that they were the #1 national park, right? I am here to tell you why they are wrong. The Yosemite Grant was signed in 1864. Yellowstone doesn't become a park until 1872, right? It was these views, these tunnel views, that helped us create the idea of public lands. Why did we get called a grant and they got called a park? Simple technical error. We were a state. We had a functioning state government. The U.S. Congress was in the practice of delegating management and funding of parks and lands like that to the states, so they signed it off to California for management. Delegated a superintendent for the park in 1864, whereas Yellowstone was simply a territory, a wee territory. They had no state functioning government. We had this. The views that inspired the history and the creation of public land in the United States, a model that was replicated and has been replicated around the world, creating national park systems across the globe. So you're going to have another 10 to 15 minutes yourself here at Tunnel View to hop off the tram. If you haven't yet, this is a great time to fill up your water bottles, stay hydrated, put on some sunscreen. We've also got some disposable cups if you will need something to hold your water yourself.
I have water.
10 to 15 minutes, enjoy the Tunnel View.
Looks like a thunderstorm is brewing up.
Find me by the bronze relief map of Yosemite Elevator.
So it looks like a thunderstorm is brewing up.
It does kind of look like a thunderstorm is brewing.
Hard to say.
We will take our break at Tunnel View, cruise down the hill, and get you back on time.
This is actually the best view of Bridal Veil.
It's a very good one.
Tunnel View is... When was the tunnel built, and how could the first tourists have seen Tunnel View? Great question. What they actually saw was about a mile up from Tunnel View called Inspiration Point. They would be coming down from an old foot trail or what became first Walwalder Road.
Right.
The road's so nice they built it twice. We're on the second-hand version of that one. This tunnel was built in the 30s. The platform came later, and we call the whole general area the Tunnel View Valley. My other favorite question is Ranger Val, what's with the hat? I love that question. It's a funny hat. You know, this is not what most folks are wearing these days just for the sake of fashion, but it does have cultural significance, historical significance, because it's a nod to our earliest park rangers, our first park protectors. After the Yosemite Grant was signed, right, but before we had a National Park Service that ranged between 1864 and 1916, is when a group called the Buffalo Soldiers were in town. Buffalo Soldiers, given that name by Plains Native Americans because these groups of all African cavalry units from the Army, back when the Army was still segregated, the Native Americans thought that their hide, or that their hair looked like buffalo hide. So they adopted that name with pride, became the Buffalo Soldiers. Those were the folks helping protect these lands. While we had been designated as a public land, but before we had a National Park Service to protect it, they were the ones keeping out loggers, keeping out miners, helping protect this place and preserve views like Tunnel View. Right? We wouldn't have Tunnel View without our earliest rangers. And not only were they protecting the land, they were even helping educate. They were the first interpreters, if you will. There's a museum area or arboretum area in the south of the park historically where the Buffalo Soldiers labeled plant species and set up a guided interpretive walk. That's the first example that we have of a museum-style offering in the National Park Service site. So, very cool. We wear it as a nod to them. And if you still don't believe me that we are the first national park, right, on my hat band are some gold embossed sequoias. On my belt as well, sequoia cones. And those are because of the Mariposa Grove. That was that first piece of land, Mariposa Grove, Yosemite Valley, the giant sequoia trees. Proof right here in the pudding. The other reason that we have views like this is because of our impressive geologic history, right? It's rock top time. I'll take you back about 300 million years. The time of volcanism in this area. So the historic Sierra mountain range. Back when we had dinosaurs roaming the foothills, we were looking at volcanoes. And when volcanoes erupt, you've got the magma shoots out into lava, hardens, flash cools when it reaches the air, becomes very brittle rock. If I'm, in my nice warm cocoon of a home in the winter, and I also open the door, get sort of flash frozen with a blast of winter air, I also might be brittle or easily to break, right? A little bit angry. That's exactly what that rock is doing when it erupts. Not so in Yosemite Valley. We are descending into the guts of an unexploded volcano. So the Sierras to the north, the Sierras to the south, those were erupting, right? Cascades. Those were erupting here. For whatever reason, this area chose not to erupt. Think of a lava lamp and a giant pillow of magma under the ground, slowly cooling over the course of millions of years, about 3 to 5 miles below the surface of the Earth. Just like you guys took the time to reboard the tram, you sat next to your friends and your family, so too do the minerals when rock slowly cools. So the mica has time to sit next to the mica, and the feldspar can sit next to the feldspar, and eventually you get this mosaic speckled pattern that is characteristic of granite. If you've ever seen a granite countertop or picked up one of our rocks that's been weathered on the valley floor surface. That's how we got our granite formation. What about location? Right, I said those were 3 to 5 miles below the surface of the Earth. It was erosion and uplift that helped us get that pluton, that giant mass of rock, up to the surface of modern day Earth. It's hard to imagine rock floating on anything, but if the whole Earth were about the size of an apple, the crust or the rocky stuff that we're looking at and driving on would only be about the relative thickness of the apple's skin. Right, so as that skin erodes away due to rock, due to wind, due to water, minerals are being taken down into the Central Valley, creating a nice agricultural hotspot, if you will, and uplifting the rest, right, bouncing back up to meet the surface. We've got formation, we've got location. In terms of the shapes, right, we've got some really unique shapes. El Capitan, Afto, in Yosemite. That's where exfoliation comes in. And glaciers. Granite and glaciers are the two most important pieces of our geologic history. A glacier, by definition, is a moving river of ice. It's moving under the weight of compressed snow, gravity flowing down at a breakneck speed of about 1 foot per day. If you want to see proof of glaciers, you have to look no further in Yosemite Valley than Bridal Falls, that hanging valley above it. See, if you have a river carving a canyon, it's going to create a V shape. Look at the Grand Canyon, you'll know that's true. There's very little light that goes to the bottom of that canyon. There's the river and not much else going at the bottom. Here, the glaciers, both up there and in the center of the valley, were scouring that V-shaped canyon, that riverbed, early riverbed, into a U-shaped, plugging rocks, plugging trees, scouring, carving out a U-shaped canyon. That's why we've got a mile of land across at our widest point. And this
Where
right
did you
here
see
was
the
a
rainbow?
glacial intersection.
Right near where she was, just for a
We're
second.
driving in the former highway glacier, right? The cars are going a little faster in this lane through the valley. The ice is a little bit deeper. It's moving with more force. It can carve a little heavier, a little deeper. Up there, that's just a tributary glacier. It's like a side street, a neighborhood street. And it's the entrance ramp onto the highway. So that ice is flowing a little slower. Doesn't quite have the power to carve, but it is getting to that same sort of U-shaped valley over time. It's merging with the flow of traffic on that highway glacier, and that drop-off, that intersection point, is where we get that hanging valley. Anytime you see a waterfall in Yosemite Valley, it's a good chance that that was a glacial overpouring in the grand scheme of history. And we haven't had glaciers on scene for about 18,000 years. They did a lot of shaping, a lot of forming the valley, changing the valley. And we have one left today, right? Little Ice Age, Tioga Glaciation.
Tioga.
You may recognize the name of, because we named the road after it, Tioga Road, up in high country. 18,000 years ago, the one glacier that rockfall in particular, right? We get a lot of rockfalls in Yosemite Valley. On average, one every 5 days there's a rockfall recorded. Some of those are as small as a baseball-sized rock, maybe whizzing past the helmet of a climber, gets told about to a ranger and we report it in our rockfall database. Others are a lot harder to miss. In 1987, we had one of those harder to miss rockfalls from the Three Brothers, which is this feature over here in half sun, half shade through the trees. 1987, on March 10th, Ranger Jim Tucker was on duty, and he noticed, driving out of the lodge, just like we did when we pulled out at the beginning of our tram, that right below Camp 4 there were some pebbles on the road that hadn't been there on his first loop of the day. So he took that to note. He watched as a few more pebbles started joining those pebbles on the road. Ranger Jim took to his intuition to say, I think we're going to have a rockfall. I'm going to close the road. He shut it down right in front of Camp 4. Traffic backed up all the way around the valley, even onto this south side drive where we're driving. The visitors were not happy, right? We don't like it when the roads aren't moving here in Yosemite Valley. Ranger Tucker's boss got on the radio, said, Jim, I need you to move traffic through. This is not okay. We need to get our visitors to their reservations. But Ranger Jim stuck to his guns. He said, no, this is a dangerous situation. And not 1 hour later did 600,000 cubic meters of rock fall from the middle peak of the middle brother there on the Three Brothers, named after Chief Tenaya's 3 sons. Chief Tenaya was an early Awanichi leader.
So I guess it is Tenaya.
600,000 cubic meters. If that's hard to picture, 1 cubic meter is about the size of a washing machine. So 600,000, over 500,000 washing machines tumbling off of that middle peak onto the road, buried the road in 12 to 15 feet of rock and rubble. It took us 3 months to remove those rocks, repair the damage, and we turned this section of road into two-way traffic during that traditional Awanichi historic burns practices back into the Mariposa Grove. We had a 50-year history of prescribed fire, and the Mariposa Grove itself was untouched. Even though on the sides of that, the trees were down, the land is wiped, not a single mature sequoia was harmed because the fuel load had been reduced due to prescribed burns in the Mariposa Grove. That fire lasted a majority of the month of July last year, and on July 15th, Dr. Yan passed away after a career of fire management, bringing fire ecology and healthy land management, traditional ecological knowledge back into management practices in Yosemite. Now, in his final days, he lived long enough to see the impact of his lifetime body of work, bringing fire back into the ecosystem, and to know that the Mariposa Grove was going to be spared and reached peak fire, and they had it under control by the time of his death. I think that's an incredible story, incredible advocation for why we should be using these traditional land management practices, and why you'll continue to see fires and prescribed fires in Yosemite during reduced fire risk seasons of spring and fall. Now, it's those exact same kind of traditional ecological knowledge, those traditional practices, that we're going to have to continue to rely on and incorporate back into our management styles to save a few other Yosemite icons, right? Not just the giant sequoias, not just those culturally important, those traditionally important trees that were some of the first icons of a National Park Service, and the cones that are on my hat, but other icons too, like that tallest waterfall in North America that we're coming up on a view of. There's a report out of UC Berkeley from 2021 that says by the year 2050, the Sierra may receive no snowpack. What's happening is called whiplash weather. Last year we got 40% annual snowpack. This year we got 300% annual snowpack. If we lose our snowpack or have a majority of years without snow, we're going to lose our snow melt. And if we lose our snow melt, we're going to lose our ephemeral waterfalls. Waterfalls like the Yosemite Falls. The falls that were in Thomas Ayer's sketches, that made it into Thomas Hutchings' tourism magazines, that inspired photographers like Watkins to get photos onto the desk of President Lincoln and sign Yosemite into public land, right? This is a cultural icon, this is a national icon. And to lose something like this, I think would be detrimental to our nation. Take those photos, let's enjoy it. We've got a view of the full stack of falls coming up with some moody storm clouds in the back. It's excellent photography. Let's enjoy it while we got it.
Yeah. The thunderstorm is cooling it down some.
Lucky for us, if there is any landscape in the world that can inspire a tradition of conservation and environmental restoration, I do believe it is Yosemite. And what would you say if I told you that we're coming up on a prime example of that restoration history? Just below Yosemite Falls, below this spectacular view, used to be a landfill. This beautiful meadow with the grasses just having dried out ever so much that they make the sound in the wind right now. Home to birds, bear sightings, mule deer. Right below Yosemite Falls. This used to be where our early settlers, your early Euro-American settlers, buried their trash. Probably the most picturesque landfill in the United States, if you ask me. Old Yosemite Village was built in this meadow, Sentinel Meadow. We've got one remaining building from that old village, and that's the chapel up here. Not in its original location, they moved it out of a floodplain. Turns out, early settlers built everything on a floodplain. They figured that out pretty quickly. So we've since relocated Yosemite Visitor Services and villages to the other side of the valley. But once they left their trash. They left the compacted ground that could no longer hold water after grazing and raising cattle.
Doors of opportunity.
And they wanted to restore this meadow below Yosemite Falls and restore these views. So we dug up the trash, we dug up the meadow, we replanted native species, right? There's a lot of non-native species here in the valley, like this fire maple right here. This fire maple, it's the first tree to light up red in the fall. Really beautiful. Planted by settlers, it's not a native species. We try to put native species back in the meadow, restore this ecological area, because meadows themselves are so critical to biodiversity and the wildlife in a national park. Despite being 3% of all land area, we are our state the size of Rhode Island. Meadows
Okay, you
account
can
for
see the whole
33%
falls here.
or 1/3 of all biodiversity. Every single plant and animal species in this national park is in a meadow, like the one that we just passed. So restoration, preservation of that land area is super important. The story continues though, right? Early Yosemite Village was built there in the late 1800s. By late 1890, we get a Scotsman on scene, a sheep herder and a carpenter by the name of John Muir, you may have heard of him, who helps us level up from grant status, state-managed grant, to national park title on par with Yellowstone in 1890 by advocating to Congress, by advocating to leaders, that if we want to save views like Yosemite Falls, because it's been at risk before, if we want to save views like Yosemite Falls, we can't just protect what's in eyesight. We have to protect what's around it, the watershed, everything that contributes to those waterfalls. We lobbied to Theodore Roosevelt, held a campground, held a camp out for him, talked to Stephen C. Mather, first director of the Park Service, and we get checkbox, national park status by 1890. 1892, John Muir has gone on to found the Yosemite, or the Sierra Club, rather, headquartered here in Yosemite. Sierra Club is one of the oldest, earliest, long-standing grassroots environmental organizations in the United States, and it was headquartered here originally in a building that we're about to pass on the right-hand side with a gray slate roof that looks a lot like Hagrid's hut. You're a fan of Harry Potter.
The LeConte
It's a
Memorial.
bit of a pilgrimage for me on this
Conte
part
was
of
a
the tour,
geologist.
because this building, the head Sierra Club
UC
headquarters,
Berkeley.
Sierra Club helped advocate in 1970 for the passage of NEPA, National Environmental Protection Act, founding of the first Earth Day, and the founding of the Environmental Protection Agency. When I'm not a ranger, a lot of folks ask what we do in the winters. I used to work for EPA in DC, so it's almost like both of my jobs started here in Yosemite, Sierra Club headquarters, that first visitor center, home to Ansel Adams as a custodian in his early years, his early 20s, he found work here. So, important building in the history of conservation, the Yosemite Conservation Heritage Center. If you're here on a Friday or a Saturday night, there are often free evening programs to attend on the theme of conservation and the history of conservation.
It does look like Hagrid's hut. I didn't notice that.
Make no mistake,
Oh,
conservation
yeah.
is not just in our history, it's very much in our present and being planned into our future. We've got housekeeping camp here over to the left, and if you see through the trees, those brown metal boxes, almost like refrigerators on their side, those are bear boxes. And the first example of a conservation comeback that I'm going to give you from modern era. The American black bear finds its home here in Yosemite National Park in the Sierra Nevada. We've got about 300 to 500 Yosemite black bears. This is the time of year where they start to come out and about. We've got some berries blooming, we've got some apple trees growing their fruit. So it's not uncommon that you might see a black bear sighting in the evenings or mornings around a meadow area. Again, biodiversity, right? Those meadow zones. I could tell you, however, if you were a visitor in the 1920s, I could tell you a lot easier than to see a bear sighting. And that would be, oh, come to my bear feeding show.
Oh, yeah.
7 or 8 p.m. in the evening, the stage lights come on, the riser seating accommodates thousands of visitors, while the ranger hand feeds food, human food, to a bear in order to appease the visitor and get them some wildlife sightings. Now there's nothing wrong with wildlife getting food, right? Black bears are an exception, right? If you teach a mama bear who teaches a baby bear, who grows up into a mama bear who teaches their baby bear,
It goes on
that
generations.
humans equal food, it's going
Yeah.
to take many a generation of bear cubs
Yes.
to break that cycle. After all, why would you spend your day foraging here under Half Dome at Stoneman Meadow for a couple of grubs at a couple of calories apiece if you could just walk up on some unassuming visitors, swipe their cooler full of prime rib, full of steaks, get your entire week's worth of calories in one go? An American black bear needs 5,000 calories this time of year, and closer towards the fall when you're getting ready to den from the winter, 20,000 calories a day. We stopped our bear feeding shows in the 1840s. We closed our last open dump, our unclosed dump, in about, yeah, there's some deer over there. Nice wildlife
Deer.
sighting.
Oh, I see him.
We closed our last open dump in 1870. Sorry, 1970. But because of that legacy, the social nature of bears and how they train their young, we're still dealing with bear problems. Right? 1998, we had 10 to 15 break-ins per night of bears taking their 3-inch claws, ripping open locked car doors like a tuna can, and breaking in for those coolers and those snacks.
Oh, yeah.
We got funding from Congress, that's the conservation comeback side of the story. We got funding to put bear boxes and bear lockers in every single campground, picnic area, and trailhead.
When was that?
We've got a wildlife team now.
What?
They patrol the campgrounds and
1998?
picnic areas, make sure that bears and humans are not in conflict. Getting us back to that traditional way of life,
earlier.
coexisting
Yeah, it was
with
earlier.
wildlife.
At least
We're not out of the woods yet though, so my charge to you is to make sure if you're camping or staying in the park, we're taking all smellable items out of our vehicles, because now we still do have 10 to 15 break-ins per year. Better than 10 to 15 per night, but not quite out of the woods. Coming up on another site of a conservation comeback, and that is Ahwahnee Meadow here. We can see the Ahwahnee Hotel through the trees. It's undergoing a seismic restoration project for earthquake protection. The Ahwahnee Meadow, named after such, and of course the early people, place of the gaping mouth, Ahwahnee Chief. Ahwahnee Meadow also used to host Firefall, the Firefall tradition. Now you may have heard Firefall in the context of modern-day horsetail falls, meaning that on El Capitan every spring, there's a waterfall that flows off the edge and gets hit with sunlight at sunset at an angle that makes it look like molten lava is pouring off of the rock. It's a photographer's dream, and in fact, thousands of them come every February to get that photo. Not quite what I'm talking about. Historic firefall happened from Glacier Point and from Half Dome behind us, up through the 1960s. There's a story in our archives about rangers taking used car oil. Yosemite Valley used to be so dusty, the trip in here was so dusty that you'd need an oil change every time you entered the valley. They would change the oil, put it in the garage in a storage vat, and rangers would hike that up the Half Dome cables, jump it off the most iconic cliff face in the National Park Service, and light it on fire so that visitors could watch the effect every night. Glacier Point is also right up there. That's 3,000 feet above the valley floor. Right above campground, Camp Curry right below. They also used to light a bonfire up at Glacier Point. Camp Curry hosts would let the Glacier Point hotel hosts know when they were ready. And the Glacier Point hosts would take a bulldozer and push the bonfire embers off of the cliff over so that folks could see the fall of fire. Nothing wrong with that, right? Pushing embers on top of a campground in fire season during summer with peak visitation. I'm sure you can tell why we don't do that anymore. But for a number of reasons, including the damage that our meadows were taking. Right? We're still undergoing some restoration here. There used to be paths crisscrossing, shortcutting across the meadows. Thousands of people standing nightly watching fire fall in either direction. And that takes its toll on these ecosystems. So we're rehabilitating that. We're letting those lichen, those microclimates grow back on the sides of the cliff faces. But we can still see the scarring from those oil stains from that fire fall off of the face of Half Dome today. It's not all water staining. It's not all lichen. Some of it is, in fact, remnants of those choices in our conservation history. In the 60s, the Park Service took on more of a conservation ethic in their style. So we phased out those visitor entertainment events like Firefall and bear feeding shows. But luckily we can still offer you entertaining and hopefully educational tours like this one. Historic Firefall is no longer in operation. We're coming up here on a little bit of traffic because we're in the well-visited Yosemite Village area, modern-day Yosemite Village, the one that was removed from the floodplain. We've got some brand new bathroom buildings here, brand new paved parking lot from that infrastructure act I was talking about, putting those funds to good use. And through the trees, the main Yosemite Village, which includes a brand new welcome center, comes open at the end of summer, September or October time frame. Brand new building, new plaza, new restrooms, putting those infrastructure dollars to good use. Yosemite Village is also home to a post office and ranger club were built in traditional little architecture style, rustic architecture. You'll know when you see it. Rustic exposed beams, rocks that look like they've been plucked straight from a riverbank, making the foundation. Rustic architecture, nice piece of cultural heritage coming out of the Park Service. Those buildings are also National Register of Historic Places. You can see those in Yosemite Village. We're about to eat at Degnan's Deli. Check out Ansel Adams Gallery, the Indian Cultural Museum, where you can see those arm-width wide baskets woven by master basket makers like Julia Parker and Lucy Tellis. And I love that in the village we have this dichotomy of the Indian Cultural Museum, where we're interpreting thousands of years of history here in the park, right across the street from the modern-day admin building, where the superintendent and park admin staff are actively planning for the future of this park, this national park. The Yosemite Cemetery, or Yosemitery, if they had taken my name advice, is throughout the village. You can see the gravestone of a Galen Clark, that's the man who blew up that dynamite reservoir there for the river that bore rain in the Yosemite. There's a nice walking tour if you're looking for a shaded afternoon walk. We've got some nice natural cloud cover here this evening. And of course, across from the village is Cook's Meadow. This, folks, is my favorite sunset spot. Right now, we've got the coneflower blooming in yellow and some shooting star in purple. There's a nice boardwalk about half a mile in distance from the far side. If you're looking towards Half Dome, that's the best place to see alpenglow, I think, in the valley. Alpenglow is an effect where, especially with particulate matter in the air this time of year, with controlled burns at the beginning of fire season, the sunset comes in, reflects off Half Dome, lights up Half Dome, makes it look orange and then red and then even purple towards the end of the sunset. Very cool effect that I encourage you to check out during sunset hours, weather dependent. Yeah, these folks on the Cook's Meadow boardwalk right here.
Cooler.
Yosemite Village, not only home to modern-day conservation tradition, but also modern-day cultural tradition. Traditions like the Pride Parade, the annual Pride Parade. Earlier this month, we had about 200 employees identifying as LGBTQIA+, led by one Patagonia, not the company, but the drag queen from Instagram. Ended in the village. Great turnout this year, celebrating Pride in our national parks. Village is also home to the end of the Mono Pass traditional walk, a little longer than a Pride Parade. It's almost 65 miles by foot, either direction, alternating each year.
Wow.
7 associated tribes of the Yosemite Valley host that, Southern Sierra Miwok being the primary host there, and in alternating directions will walk the traditional route of their ancestors, trading goods from the valley like deer grass and those made baskets over the pass with obsidian found from Mono Lake, and brine shrimp as a food source that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to find here. It's a 65-mile trek. One year they'll start in the valley and end in Mono Lake. They'll swap that the next year, following in the footsteps, making sure those stories get told and that oral tradition gets passed down. Yosemite Village also holds bear dances and big time, these powwow-like events that draw a large native traditional gathering to celebrate culture, wake up the bears, put them to sleep every night with ceremonies, or every season with ceremony. Traditions such as that. To the south of the park, our Chinese Historical Society at San Francisco, in partnership with Yan Yan Chen, a ranger here, lead the traditional walk, the Chinese traditional walk every year, up to the top of Sing Peak, the Sing Peak pilgrimage, honoring a famed backcountry chef, Tai Sing, who cooked, known for his famed meals, his delicious backcountry meals, for people like Stephen T. Mather, our first Park Service director, who helped us get that signature for a national park status. Other traditions you may have been a part of as you're here in the valley include camping in the campgrounds. You've heard the shout of Elmer campgrounds at night. Not exactly sure where that one comes from.
It goes back a long time.
Archives are saying that it's been around a while and that it could have been folks calling for a water boy in the past. So maybe you miss a kid, maybe a water boy. We're not exactly sure where that tradition comes from. We'll leave it to legend on that one. If you're looking to add your own tradition or your own traditional walk to your tour here, your time in Yosemite, both Cook's Meadow or Yosemite Falls are going to be a great place to do so. Yosemite Falls is ADA accessible, 1 mile, wheelchair and stroller accessible from the right-hand side. Take your family up there, feel the mist, the full sensory experience in Yosemite National Park. It's a great thing to do to cool off after a trim like this. If it were hotter, we're getting a nice breeze though right now. These clouds are coming in. It feels great. Off to the right here, we're coming back up on Camp 4, which means I've got time to tell you one more story before we deboard our tram this afternoon.
Little tents.
It's my favorite. I think wraps up this theme of conservation, of tradition, of human and nature working in tandem, and it's the peregrine falcon project. Peregrine falcons are an apex species, a predator species here in the park. They are beautiful birds. They can fly 200 miles per hour, and they physically knock their prey out of the air in order to catch food. In the 20s and 30s, we had a booming peregrine falcon population. They love to nest on big walls like these, the same big walls that our climbers like to climb. But in the 1930s, the pesticide DDT was invented and then added into agriculture in the Central Valley. It made its way up into the food chain and concentrated in apex predators like peregrine falcons. It rendered them unbreedable to the point that mama peregrine falcons would try and incubate their own eggs and crush their own young with the toxins in the eggshells, making them so thin. What did we do? The conservation comeback of this story is enlist none other than the climbers who resided here in Camp 4. We asked our climbers, said, hey, we can't get to these peregrine falcon nests to intervene. They're thousands of feet up on the valley floor, up on El Capitan. So our climbers used the strength of their grip, climbed up to those peregrine falcon nests, thousands of feet above, gently pocketed those peregrine falcon eggs, climbed them down. We shipped them off to University of Santa Cruz for incubation under wildlife management specialists. Hatched them up into baby chicks. Within 72 hours, got those chicks back to the climbers and back up in their nest before they imprinted on a human caretaker, and before Mama Bird was none the wiser. They stole those ping pong ball replica eggs back. Sounds crazy, but it worked. And we went from a trough of 0 breeding peregrine falcons in the 1940s through 1970s up to 15 plus breeding pairs as of last year's study. It's still an ongoing project, still a nice marrying of that human-centered climbing culture and our conservation culture, bringing it all together, humans working in nature in tandem. It's this exact sort of relationship that we're going to have to continue protecting our public lands, bringing in that traditional ecological knowledge, right? Enjoying the valley views and the grand
Whoa, did you hear the thunder?
Sure did.
Just in time, we're going up to the lodge. But also, right, taking the time to appreciate the
You'll hear it on my video.
Unassuming views. I encourage you all, right, charge you with proper food management. So when you're out on trail, we're storing our food properly from wildlife. We're not feeding the bears like we used to. We're staying on trail and we're leaving no trace to leave this park better than we found it. I became a ranger in 2020, first working at Mount Rainier, and the second season here under the idea and the belief that telling stories like these, like the peregrine falcons, like Obata and his art, like the bear feeding
Yosemite Falls Counter,
is what's going to help people connect with lands like these and preserve and protect them. So above all else, I hope you take these stories home. Forget the facts if you have to, but the stories, the heart of the stories, take those home and become a good steward of this park. Share the word that this is a place worth protecting. It's been my honor to spend the past 2 hours with you on the Valley Floor Tour. I hope it has been a valuable experience. And I'll be around for the next couple minutes after we deboard the tram to answer any lingering questions, or otherwise if you need to be pointed in the right direction after your tram tour. Bathrooms are going to be inside the lodge. Yosemite Falls is going to be this way through the parking lot, about a 5-minute walk. And shuttle stop 7 will be 3 minutes this way to the left of the lodge. I hope you all, wherever you're coming from, whether it's your first visit or your 50th, hope you are learning something new this tour, this trip, and that you have a great rest of your visit in Yosemite National Park. Have a great holiday weekend as well.